Okay, just a few more beats here. Okay, hello everyone and welcome to P&P Live. My name is Heidi and I'm the Community Outreach Coordinator at Politics and Prose. Thank you for joining us and tuning into this virtual format where we continue to bring authors and new books to you. I have the pleasure of hosting our event this evening and I am absolutely delighted to welcome our guests, Young Vo, in conversation with Minh. Before we get started, just a few important housekeeping notes to mention. If you would like to have closed captioning for this event, please look at the bottom of your screen and click on live transcript and then select show subtitle. You can click the link that we will drop into the chat box to get your own copy of Gibberish. Here. Yay! As well as Minh's book, Drawn Together. Lastly, if you have questions for our guests, you can click the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen and add one there. At the end of the presentation, our guests will have time to answer some of your questions. You can also upvote the questions you like and want most answered. Now, onto the event you're waiting for. Young Vo is a traditionally trained animator, having graduated with a Bachelor of Fine Arts degree from the California Institute of the Arts Character Animation Film Program. There, he learned how to communicate with moving pictures. After graduating from Cal Arts, he worked in film for a short time before pursuing an animation career within the video game industry. He started out working for large gaming companies on the West Coast, but eventually moved to Maryland to pursue an opportunity at an independent studio. Gibberish is his debut picture book. Minh is the award-winning author of the picture books Lift, Drawn Together, Let Me Finish, and The Perfect Seat. He also wrote Green Lantern Legacy, a middle-grade graphic novel for DC Comics. In addition to writing books, Minh serves on the board of We Need Diverse Books and has written for a variety of publications, including the New York Times, The Horn Book, NPR, and HuffPost. Outside of spending time with his wonderful wife and children at their home in San Diego, his favorite place to be is in the middle of a good book. And it is my pleasure to turn the event over to the two of you.
Great, thank you so much, Heidi.
Awesome.
Young, how's it going?
Great, man.
How are you feeling? This is your debut. This is a huge deal. This is a big day for you.
I am excited and terrified at the same time that my book is being read by people I don't know. So, yeah.
That's interesting about being a creator. It's like you have this book that you've been sitting with and living with for so long that once it goes out into the world, it takes on a life of its own. And it's exciting, but terrifying, like you said, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, because like you said, I've been living with the story in my head for so long. And then, outside of some close friends and author, my editor, working on the book, no one else really read it, and like no one really knew the story. And in the back of your head, you're always like, is this any good? Will people understand what I'm trying to say? And especially since I'm writing about gibberish, so it's like, yeah, a lot of those questions cross my mind.
I can confirm that it is good. It's very good. And I'm honored that you all invited me to join you for this launch and to be in conversation with you all. When I go to talk to kids, I always tell them that, like, for me, I feel like a book isn't done until it's being read and it's being shared with people. So I figured the best way to start off would be just to have the story time and share your story with everybody. If that sounds good to you.
That sounds great. Let me share my screen.
Great. You share your screen. I will go off screen, but I will be back to chat with you once the story time is done.
Right. Oop, wrong. Don't want to start there. All right. So gibberish. This is the cover. And then when you turn the first the cover over, you see this wall of gibberish, and then you see some couple letters saying gibberish. And you turn the page, and then you see this is the title page, and then on the left page you see a mom and her son on the edge of an island, almost being pushed off into the water. And then on the right side, we see the mom and the son in a boat. And then we see the ocean that they were sailing on. And then now we see a plane. And then the story starts. First, Dad sailed on a boat, then flew on a plane. And today, Dad will be on a school bus. When people speak, it will sound like gibberish, Dad. Just listen and do the best you can, Ma said. Hello, my name's Dad. In gibberish, the bus driver said, "Gibberish, gibberish, gibberish. Dave?" Dad nodded, but didn't really understand. And the bus bounced to the school, which I just actually don't think is very safe. And then there, Dad meets his teacher. The teacher said, "Gibberish, gibberish, gibberish. Dan?" In class, everyone knew gibberish except for Dad. Gibberish was in the books and in the air. You guys ever felt like everyone knew something you didn't? That's kind of like how Dad was feeling right now. Without knowing gibberish, there was no place to sit, no place to stand, and no one to play with. So Dad walked. "Hello, my name's Dad." Then something unexpected fell from a tree. "Hi, my name's Dad." "Gibberish, gibberish? I'm not sure what you're saying." Well, she didn't really care. She wanted to play, and she pulled Dad with her. And for the first time that day, Dad was laughing and playing, and he looked like he was having fun. But back in the classroom, Dad tried to read, but his words broke. "Gibberish, gibberish, gibberish, gibberish." The last school bell rang, and it was time to go home. On the bus ride home, Dad sat alone. Then someone unexpected dropped in. Things started to begin to change. Gibberish. Dad began to hear words: tree, boat, duck, book, frog, flower, home, plane, Julie, ball, Dad. "Julie, you know my name." "Ma, I'm back. Hi, this is my friend Julie." "Gibberish, gibberish, Dad." "Hi, Dad." Dad flew on a plane. Dad sailed on a boat. Dad rode on a school bus. And today, Dad ran home with Julie. And then we see the gibberish letters change to actual English letters.
That was great. Is that the how many times have you read that in out loud to the world before?
To be honest, not that much. Just
And
because like,
I have a day be on like, oh wait, I need to figure out how to read this, and it's always exciting to like finally like verbalize it and like speak it into existence in that way. But that
yeah,
was great. There's so many things to love about this book. I was reading it again yesterday, and one thing that I really loved was how when you start out, the first word or the first sentences are: first Dad sailed on a boat, then flew on a plane, and today Dad will be on a school bus. And when I was thinking about that, I was wondering why it struck me, and I think it was because so often the immigrant or refugee story is focused on that initial part of the journey, but your book kind of recognizes the fact that the journey doesn't end once you arrive in a new country, right? It's like there are other steps. There's so much more that has to happen, and their journey is really just beginning for a lot of people. So
yep.
Your story really does a great job like picking up where a lot of people think the story is ending, right? And I thought you did a really wonderful job of that.
Oh, thanks. Yeah,
Um,
like the beginning was it was kind of hard to kind of figure out where to start. You know what I mean? Like in a story, and like for me, like you're right that the beginning for me as a kid, like you know, being a refugee kid, like it was a totally different new place, and for me that was like the you know, it was a kind of a challenge, right? Just trying to figure maneuver in that new place, and yeah, it kind of took me a while to kind of figure out where to start that story, and I felt like that was a good spot where like I felt like the school was like the perfect entry point for like representation of the country itself, really. So
Yeah, that was a really perfect way to start the story. So before we get into conversation, I just wanted to remind people what Heidi said before, that feel free to, I see some people already dropping questions to the chat, into the Q&A box. So keep those rolling, and I'll keep an eye on those as we go along. And maybe I'll pepper some of those in, or we'll get to those at the end. But something you mentioned just now when you're talking about how you came up with the story, the idea for the story, you mentioned being a refugee kid. So I was curious how much of Gibberish is inspired by your own life.
Well, I definitely was on a boat, and I definitely was on a plane. So a lot of it definitely was from my own life, in terms of like basically just trying to understand where I was. And a lot of it was based on like me connecting with friends at school, was like where I really connected with like the US, really, like and it was funny, like, so I was we were talking about gibberish to other people, and then this one friend's going, wow, that's totally my story too, because like she was an army kid and she went to Germany, and basically she learned basically rabbit because her friend drew a rabbit, right? And then said that in German, and she figured that out. And like that was similar to how I learned, because like being an artist, like pictures was such an easy way to learn things for me. Like I literally drew first before I was able to write, you know. And that's another part of the story, right? So like that's also part of my story there also. Like learning pictures was a way for me to like learn to read, really. So that's why I love picture books, I guess.
Yeah, I love that. And that's gonna be one of my questions too, because in the story, the two characters finally have that breakthrough when they start finding that way to connect. So you're saying that was kind of like your story, to like how you were able to bridge that gap with other people.
Yeah, because like I didn't really, it was hard for me to read. Like I couldn't connect the words and the letters together, and I couldn't pronounce things very well. But I drew really well, and the teacher noticed that, and basically, allowed me to draw more. And then she'll put words to the letters and stuff like that. Oh, another thing was really good was like in the library, there was like story time in the library, right? Like so they'll read the picture books in the library, and then when they read it, they'll turn it over and then show me the pictures. And I was like, whoa. So like that's what you were saying. I didn't understand what you're saying, but now I do. You know. So yeah. So so like moments like that is when I kind of start connecting things together. You know. So as a kid, yeah.
I think that's beautiful, because I mean your book being about the power of art, and like the role that picture books played in your own life. Now, as a picture book creator, it's like coming full circle, because now there's going to be kids out there who see your book and have that same experience, and are able to connect with a story despite the language. I feel like the beauty of this book is like the text is at a level where anyone could engage with the story. If you were like that, who didn't know the language, you can still understand what's going on based on the visuals, based on the dynamics. And I think that's like you said, the beauty of picture books is that it is so accessible to so many people, and it can serve as a great entry point to language and communicating with others. So I think it's, to me, that your life story is something that makes so much sense, and though that it's coming to this day, or it's been building towards this day for a while.
Yeah, I mean, like writing the book was part of it, was like I was writing to that kid, right? Like,
Right.
me, right? And at the same time, I was also writing to the kid that is Julie too, because like the friends I made were like, in some ways, they were all equally brave as I was, because going to a new country, but they were equally brave in the sense that they kind of stepped out of like their comfort zone to talk to somebody outside of their group, I guess you could say, right? Like, and really connected with me, and like, so yeah, I mean, I was writing for myself, but also I was writing for that kid that helped me out too, because like I think being able to do that, I think, is also a brave act in itself. So yeah, I think the story is really about like being brave and connecting, and then like and allowing to kind of like it's kind of like cheesy, but like like the language barrier kind of falls away when you kind of like talk and play with each other and connect on a different level,
Right.
So yeah.
Yeah, no, for sure. And actually, I was gonna ask you about that too. Like you said, you're writing to the young you, but also to kids like Julie. Was there an actual Julie in when you were that age that like made that first connection?
Min, that is a great question. there, there is a person named Julie, but like it was a little later on because like because because the story that's this roughly based on was like basically when I was a kid and I was going on getting on the bus to go home. My friend Julie was like, "Oh, my mom's making cookies. You should go to my house and like have cookies." I'm like, "Oh, I love cookies." And then she took me to her house and then we had cookies and then the bus left. And then my mom was looking for me, and like she's like, where? Because I didn't come off the bus.
Uh,
And but we were playing and stuff like that. And then she called the school and the school told her, oh, he's probably at Julie's house because they saw me playing together. And then so went to Julie's house and I got in big trouble. So but yeah, so there was a friend named Julie that was loosely based off of. Yeah.
Nice. Maybe in the sequel you can have the cookies story. So yeah, the other question I had, or one of the other questions I had, and if I'm looking over to the side here, it's because I have the Q&A up on another screen, so I'm monitoring the questions. Because a couple people have questions about kind of like the style choices that you made in the book.
Yeah.
So it was very striking that in the story, the people outside of Dat and his mom are
Right.
all portrayed as cartoon characters and in black and white. I think Kristen and Neil in the chat picked up on that as well. Can you tell? And that's until he starts to make that connection. They start to become more human. They start to turn into color.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit more about your process and how you came up with that decision for the storytelling, the visual elements of your story.
Right. So I was just thinking back to when I was a kid going to a new place, especially like in a different country where I didn't know the language, I didn't know the people, they dressed differently, they acted differently. So like they were like completely different from me. And like originally I drew them as like monsters, really, like basically these strange monsters that I didn't understand. But then the more I thought about it, I was like, no, they're like cartoon characters. Like cartoon characters are like basically caricatures of real people, right? So that's one of the reasons I chose cartoon characters, because like they're just like exaggerated people. And because like in my mind they were so different, that's so strange that they were like cartoon characters, right? And then I wanted to show that that's how Dat felt about the world, and that's why like they look so different. But once he understood the world, understood people and Julie, the strangeness and the bizarreness of them fade away, and like the familiarity comes back into his world, into his life. Yeah. So that's kind of like the reasoning behind it. Yeah.
I don't know if this was intentional, but one of the things that I loved about it is in the news and like kind of like the policy ways with like people from other countries as like quote unquote, right? And the way that you portray it is kind of like flips that on its head of like he's seeing, as someone who's new, is seeing everyone else as these like strange beings, and it kind of like took the way that people usually talk about these dynamics and flipped it around to kind of like put a mirror on the story. That was really well done and really, really interesting.
Awesome. I'm so happy you picked that up, because like I also did the same thing in the book with trees. Like you notice, like she drew a tree, her version of a tree, right? And then Dat drew his version of a tree, right? Because like you look in the very beginning of the book, like the picture of the mom, like the mom and Dat, they were standing next to a palm tree, and then he drew the same tree exactly. Yeah, so he drew his version of a tree, right? And so it kind of flipped the idea of like everyone has a different meaning to the same words, right? So I wanted, and that was something that was very intentional, that I want to like, we all share the same words really, but like the meaning can be different, so
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, and I love that detail. And I think it's so well done because that's the kind of thing that you kind of like don't spell out so much. So like it requires a reader to kind of like do that digging and the type of and put those pieces together, which for me is like the strength of this type of picture book because it kind of creates this dialogue between a reader and a story. Like you're engaging in these illustrations, you're creating those connections and those meanings. And there's a lot of, as a creator, there's a lot of trust that goes into that of like, okay, I'm going to tell the story like halfway. I'm going to put all the pieces there for you as a reader to now take it and put it together yourself. Which and
Yeah,
that's a really interesting detail.
that's awesome.
So Amelia wanted to know. I had said Neil before, but were the characters or was it black and white at the beginning because Dad was sad and didn't have friends, and then it became colorful because he met a good friend. So that's a question from Amelia. So is that something that played into the color scheme?
Yes, absolutely. Like I play with color and shapes, like to kind of illustrate familiarity and isolation and separation. So like the black and white was basically to separate him from the world, right? Like if you, only him and his mom were in color because like they had like this the circle of trust and love, right? So if you look at it, look at the pictures, like basically I portray circles only when he's in a familiar place.
Mhm.
So like when Dad and his mom are there, you see them in a circle. And then when Dad is alone or sad,
Mhm.
I put him in boxes. Like so he's when he's walking to the tree, he's in a box. When he's on the bus by himself, he's in a box. When he's at school and he was confused, he was in a box, yellow boxes, right?
Uh-huh.
And when um and when when he plays with Julie, the first time she pulls him away, you guys look, he's in a green box. But then the second time he plays with her, the corners begin to like fade away, right?
Mhm.
And then the third time they play together is basically a full circle. So like he was beginning to get familiar with her.
Mhm.
Um, and the same, and then the black and white was just like more of emphasis of like the separation of him and the world, Um, yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, no, that's great. I noticed the kind of the box idea, but didn't put together that transition from her becoming part of his circle in that moment. So that's
yeah,
great.
you go to the very end, like the circles comes back when like him and his um so you see there like the big old circle now, because like they're all together now and they're familiar and like they're all in color, right? So it goes back to what Amelia said, like about how the color comes back and with the circle. So yeah.
Yeah, no, that's great. Um, Eric had a follow-up question of like, so the black and white parts of the concept, was that something that you had in mind from the beginning, or that kind of come to you as you were working on the story?
It came to me as I was working on the story. I mean, this, like I was trying to find ways to raise the stakes and like basically create that contrast so the payoff will be satisfying. And like for me, being an artist, like, the difference between black and white and color was such a, I couldn't make it any more stark than that, right? So that was the choice that I made. And like, to be honest, I was scared to do it in the beginning because like I was like, I seen other people do it, but can I do it in a way where like it's interesting and new, And I hope you guys liked it. I did my best to kind of make it different, and also I made it enforce the story more too. So I hope you guys liked it. Yeah.
Yeah, it definitely creates a mood and creates that contrast and kind of adds that dynamic element to the story. So I thought it worked great. But that's a good segue into a lot of people are asking questions. For those of you putting questions in the Q&A, we are on the same page because you're preempting a lot of the questions I have printed out already. So, but a lot of people are kind of curious about your background in the fine arts and animation and how, if you could tell us a little bit more about your background and how that informed your artwork in this book.
So animation is for me, like it was my first time doing art professionally, and also just my first time really knowing what to do with art. Because as a kid, I drew a lot, like I said, but I didn't know what to do with it because, like, as most Asian kids, your parents are telling you, you need to go make money, and I'm like, but I want to draw, and so I didn't know what to do. I was like, I didn't want to, like, be a doctor, and I was told I couldn't be an artist. So at a certain point, when you're pulled in two different directions, you kind of wind up doing nothing. So that was kind of me for a little bit. I didn't know what to do, and then until I went to Cal Arts, and that's when I got into animation. And I fell in love with it. Like the first time I did a bouncing ball was amazing, and like that was the first time that things came to life, drawings came to life for me. And but as I was at Cal Arts drawing and stuff like that, I've kept on doing the same thing that I always do. When I doodled, I drew little stories with my doodles, and like and always started adding up into my sketchbooks more and more, and as and as an artist, you kind of explore things. So I painted more. I did murals. I did oil paintings. I did watercolors. I just did a whole bunch of stuff. But I always wind up writing also. Every time I do a paint, I'll write a little bit about what that painting was about, and sometimes it got longer and longer, and eventually, like the stories for my drawings kind of like took over the sketchbook. So eventually I kind of felt like I needed to maybe start writing stories because, like, I'm already doing it. Like, why don't I try to actually do something with that? Because I guess like this a kind of an itch that has been there for a while. So so I started pouring in everything that I knew of art into my stories, and the best place for it was picture books because of how my love for picture books, and also, like, teaching me to read and all that stuff. So, like, yeah.
And
That's kind of long, but hopefully that made sense.
well, that makes total sense to me. And was it strange to go from animation to a picture book where you're producing like still frames to tell the story as opposed to animating a scene? Like, was that a strange transition for you?
Actually, strangely, no, because like animation, I feel it's all about storytelling. I mean, all my coworkers, like, they're great storytellers. Like all the animators I work with are just great storytellers. Like, because like our job is basically to be able to tell a story within a pose, right? And I just applied that to the story, to my picture books. Like, if I can, like, so one of the things I did was, like, I take all the words out of the book, right? And I just flip through the pages, and, like, can I still understand the story, right? And then I said, and if I can say yes, then then I'm pretty close to nailing it. And then I do the reverse too. If I read the text by itself, can I understand what is going on? And if I'm successful with both, then I feel like I got something. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, that's great. And actually, well, someone, let me see, who was it? Kirsten was asking, you're also an animator. Do you have any plans to animate this book or parts of this book?
I think as an animator, yes, I definitely want to. I definitely want to do something with it in terms of animation. I have some ideas, but I don't know if I can execute it quite yet. But I definitely want to do something, just because I do want to see Dat and Julie kind of come to life a little bit more. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, that would be fun for sure. So another question that came up that I was really curious about is how you came up with the language of gibberish. So you like came up with this entire not only did you write a book, you came up with your own language, which is very impressive. That this whole pictograph alphabet. So can you tell us a little bit more about how you conceived of that, and if there is actual symbology behind that it can be deciphered or not?
I love that question because, like, so I recently got a DM in Instagram from somebody that bought my book, a friend of mine, Joe, and he's like, I deciphered your book. And I'm like, what? And so like he actually did, like, so each symbols in the book is a letter, and if you really want to like figure it out, the best way is go to the page.
Is this the key here? What?
That's part of it. Yep. And also if you go to the page where Dad learns English, there's enough clues there to figure it out too. Like, so basically if you match the letters to the words, I'm sorry, the gibberish to the words, you can figure it out. Like perfect example is book, right? So like there's two if there's two symbols together, right? Yep, that's
Okay,
book.
so
Yep.
BOOK.
Yep.
Oh man, that's amazing.
Yeah. So you can figure out, there's like tons of little messages throughout the book, and also yeah. So you can pretty much figure out if you guys really want to decipher it, you can. Yeah.
If my boys knew about this, they would learn this language to send each other secret messages to keep me and their mom.
Well, I actually created a font. If your sons want it, I can send it to you. They can actually type it out. They can actually type out gibberish if they want to.
That is amazing. So someone wanted to know. Oh, so I guess the next question is like, how did you decide which symbols to use for the alphabet? Because it's so visual.
All right. So originally I wanted to match it with the English letters, but then I thought, oh, it'd be too easy. People would just figure it out. Like there is no logic to the actual symbols. Like they're random enough for, like, I feel like you at a glance it doesn't make sense and it's too bizarre. But you spent time, you can decipher it. So
that, I guess that makes sense. If there was too much logic, then it wouldn't really be true gibberish. If there was like a clear one-to-one, like it.
Yep.
That makes sense.
Yeah, that was my thinking.
Yeah. So to go back to your art real quick, I was reading through the notes in the beginning of the book, and it said, I love how you describe the art for this book as starting with pencils and watercolors before it became a big fun mess of mixed media. So can you tell us a little bit how that process evolved and how you landed on this visual style for the book?
Yeah, so it was just a big learning experience for me, like trying to make a picture book. So I started out with pencils and just trying to draw, trying to tell a story with pencil marks, and then I'm like, okay, I need to do something. So I threw in watercolor, and then I'll get feedback from friends, and they're like, try this thing, and then I'll try that. And so I started throwing different things at it just to kind of develop a look that's unique and different. And then I thought, oh, I got something. And then I was talking, and then I met Arthur, like my editor. And then he gave me feedback, and I was like, oh, he doesn't like this. So I was like, I need to figure out how to like answer the questions that he was asking about the art, right? And so I was experimenting with color pencils at that time, and then he asked me another question, and then I'm like, maybe I just try something completely different. And then so I did like watercolor, and then he asked me another question. And I'm like, you know what? I want to do digital, and then by the end, I just, you know what? I'm gonna throw everything at it. So yeah, so there was like color pencils in there. There was like some watercolor washes in there. One thing that is consistent throughout though is the lighting. So I did digital lighting throughout the book. So like to answer the previous question about like black and white and the color, one way I did to tie them together to make them fit in the same world was to have them lit the same. So if you go to the kitchen, the cafeteria scene, that is lit, and so are the kids.
Oh, this scene here.
Yeah. So if I didn't light them in the same way, they'll feel like too different, and we wouldn't feel like they're in the same space. So I had to light them similar. Yeah. So it's a lot of experimenting to kind of come up with the style. I wish I can say I had logic behind a lot of it, but like it was like a lot of experimentation and then finding, I guess, the logic at the end.
Whatever process led you to the final product, it worked. So good job.
Thanks, man.
Someone wanted to know specifically about, so this is a question from Eric. What inspired the bus concept, which was illustrated? So I guess the bus is a very unique, uniquely rendered in the book. What anything inspire that?
So so as a kid, this is gonna sound weird, but as a kid, when I was waiting for the bus, because like I lived near like basically it was kind of a small hill, and the bus would just kind of bounce down the hill, right?
Mhm.
And then it looked like this big caterpillar was just bouncing down the hill, right? So that's why like I drew the bus kind of bouncing around, and I also like drew it kind of like mushy.
Mhm.
You look at like the close up of it, like there's like little folds in there. Yeah, there's little folds in there, and it's kind of bending, because like that's how as a kid that's how I saw the bus. Like I saw it's just a big bug that was coming down the hill to get me. So that's why I chose that.
That reminds me of the first day my wife and I took our oldest to the bus stop to go to school, and watching him step onto the bus and just like disappearing inside that. It felt like he was like, swallowed up by this huge monster. It was taking him
Like
away.
no.
But yeah, so going back to your illustration and your art, Daisy wanted to know if you could tell us some of your illustrator animator influences. Like, is there anyone that really inspires you and that you draw upon?
Yeah, that's a lot. Animator, I mean, I think the 9 old men of Disney, I think are I think to me like Milk Call, Ollie and Frank. I think those guys are just amazing animators, and you guys ever read The Illusion of Life? Definitely go read that if you want to learn about animation. Illustrators, so many. I think contemporary wise, a friend of yours, Dan Santat, I think I think his work is amazing. I think like book that you work with him drawn together, like I thought that was phenomenal. Like the like the detail he put in there, and like the composition I thought was amazing.
I actually saw a lot of similarities between your book and that one, because there's a lot of that use of color and to inform the story and kind of have those themes come out through the visuals as well. So it felt like there are a lot of parallels, and like the way they connected over art at the end, it felt like very much like the two go hand in hand nicely.
Awesome. Also cartoon, the cartoon style too is also George Harriman. Like he's an old cartoonist, really black and white cartoonist that's really cool, that I do some definitely influence from. Yeah, Charles Schultz, yeah, Calvin Hobbes, like like oh yeah.
Oh my Calvin Hobbes for sure.
Yeah.
So let me see. I want to make sure I get to as many of these questions as I can. So you'd mentioned before kind of like how the story evolved as you were working on it. Were there any unexpected changes that happened? Like, did it change drastically from when you started? Were there any suggestions that or Antonio's asking, did your editor suggest any changes that you didn't want to make, or that you had to like kind of
oh wait, is Antonio? Yeah, okay. So Arthur, I want to say my editor, I feel like he's a Jedi, because he like this is my first time working with an editor, so I have no other experience. So he would just ask me questions, and when he asked me questions, I would like I wouldn't understand the answer until like I started thinking it through, and like I'm like, oh my god, I have to change. Okay, I'll give you a perfect example. So remember that story, Julie, I told you about my friend, like basically pulled me away from the bus stop, and then I missed the bus.
Right.
So my thinking was in the story was like basically Julie will pull me away, and then and then as we're playing, going to her house, that's when Dad would learn gibberish. And then Arthur just asked me, wouldn't that be scary for the mom? Because as a parent, that would be terrifying to have your kid missing and so that. And then I'm like, but that's the story though, and then, but then,
It was a,
yeah. Uh, and so I was sitting, so I had to sit down, really think about it, right? Like, is there a way for me to tell it where like it's not frightening for parents? Like, because he was absolutely right, but he just asked me that question, but it just made my brain explode and think of all these like different scenarios and ways to solve that problem, and then I came up with the bus idea of like them sharing it on the bus, and then as I was drawing it, I was like, oh, this is gonna be really fun. And then I was just kind of going with it, and like, and I'm like, oh, I'll make the pages like the sketchbook, and and then I would say, oh, the drawings would tell the story, and then so it's excuse me, so it just kind of it snowballed, and then yeah, the story changed for the better. But the core of the story didn't change, but the situation that I put them in changed. That makes sense. And that's why I say that Arthur is like a Jedi, because like he made me change the situation for the better, but it didn't change the story. Like, and that just came about because he just asked me one question, but it was for the better though. It's like I think that it made the story so much stronger. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, no, I always feel like the best editors are just like the best at asking the right question to like prompt you to like problem solve and figure out, and then you figure out something that ends up being better than it was originally. So that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So we have a really thoughtful question from Jennifer Dodson. First of all, she says, OMG, please share the font. So you've got someone who wants to write a report or send an email in gibberish. And she has a question for both of us. And she says, drawn together in gibberish both demonstrate the power of language and the power of making connections across languages. How do you feel about bilingualism and maintaining native languages, especially for immigrant or refugee children? Jennifer is an ELL teacher and would love to share our answer with her students.
Why don't you go first? It's like, I've been jibber jabbing like the whole time.
Yeah, no, for me, like Drawn Together was also inspired by my own story, and like how I kind of, Vietnamese was my first language, but I kind of let it slip over time. And like when I went to school, I was speaking more English and kind of tipped the scales in that direction. I would say that whenever I talk to kids now, I'm like, it's such a gift to have multiple languages that I feel like when I was growing up, speaking another language at home was seen almost as a deficit, right? It's like that's something you had to overcome. And I think now we've evolved to a point where like that is a source of strength and something that you can draw upon, and something that you can that is of actual value as opposed to something that is an obstacle, right? So I think that simple reframing and rethinking of language is important. And then also just in talking to kids and talking to teachers, realizing that there are so many ways to tell stories, there are so many ways to communicate. And just because a student in your class, like I was maybe the shyest kid in the history of my school, I like never wanted to talk to anyone. Like went like months without speaking. But that didn't mean I wasn't engaged or wasn't thinking of things. I just had to find my own way in, right? So I think when you're coming to a new place like that in the book, or me when I was a kid, it may take a little more time to find that courage and find those entry points into a classroom or into a group of kids or talking to your teacher. But that doesn't mean that they're not wanting that connection or not trying to make that connection. So those are just two thoughts that I had. So, but I appreciate all the work you're doing, Jennifer, and the value you're putting and bringing to your classroom.
Yeah, I second that for sure. I totally agree with what you're saying. Like I totally believe that you should if you can learn more than one language, I think you should absolutely do, because it only broadens your view of the world, and it also broadens your ability to connect in different ways to the world too. You know, like in Europe, like I think most Europeans speak more than one language. You know, and I think if you can connect with somebody else on a different level because you can speak their language, I think that's great. Um, like you, like talking with my family, like I have the vocabulary of a 5-year-old boy, you know.
Same,
So
yeah.
yeah, and I wish I could connect with them on a deeper level sometimes, you know, because like, but I still communicate with them, you know, I still talk with them and so that. But if I knew Vietnamese better than I do, I would connect on a deeper level, which I think, not that they don't know that I care for them or anything like that, but like it'd be nice to like have the nuances of language at my disposal, you know. But yeah, if you can learn a new language and you can connect with someone deeply, I think why not? You know, I think you can only be better for it. So yeah.
Yeah, it's tricky because it's like you said, there's even with the language barrier, there's no doubt about the depth of love that exists and how much you love like your grandparents and people in your family. But it is those nuances that make it tricky. Like I always, my wife used to call her grandparent or still calls her grandparents and just says like, "What'd you have for lunch? What'd you think about this movie?" Just like everyday conversation. I would be sitting there like my mind blown. I was like, I've never had that conversation, that casual, just everyday conversation with my grandparents because I didn't have vocabulary for it. I didn't have that access point to it. It didn't
Yeah.
mean that we love each other any more, or any less, but I was missing on that level of interaction. I think both of our books kind of talk about like how you can have connections that that transcend language, but that doesn't mean that language isn't an important way of making those connections as well. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's kind of a double-edged sword. It's like both things can be true at the same time, kind of thing.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
I would have to say I was probably misrepresenting myself. My vocabulary is probably more like a 4-year-old than a 5-year-old. So though I actually just started taking Vietnamese classes with a professor over Zoom because I did a school visit with a classroom in Vietnam.
Oh,
And
nice.
it was going great. But then I did a visit with a kindergarten class, and all they wanted me to do was speak to them in Vietnamese, and I like froze. I couldn't, like, I was like,
Oh, yeah.
all my insecurities and baggage just came to the front. And I was like, okay, I need to get over this. I'm gonna do something about it. So it took me, you know, 30 plus 40 years to get to this point, but I'm finally taking those steps.
That's so funny. I'm thinking the same thing because I'm gonna visit with my mom, and I'm like, okay, I need to brush up because like my aunts and uncles and stuff like gonna come at me, and I'm gonna be like, ah,
Yeah.
fuh.
um, so I think we're getting close to time, but I think a good question to end on that a lot of people are asking is kind of like what's next for you? Now that you've got your debut out, you have time, you should take as much time as you want to embrace this moment, but people are gonna want to know what's next. So do you have anything in the works?
Um, I do. I haven't talked to Arthur yet about it because I'm still working out the overall story arc, I guess you say. Yeah, I definitely have several stories, but so how I was talking about like my sketchbook and I drew a lot of stories there. So I'm pulling stories from that from my sketchbooks and kind of like sort of like actually making books out of them. So I do have one that I do want to talk to author about, but again, it's nothing worth talking about yet.
Right. Well, you should, I mean, this is the debut book is like a lifetime achievement, right? So you should take the time to savor this moment and
Thank
like
you. Yeah.
be present. For sure. One other quick question from Charlene is I guess she must see something about your animation style and your illustration style because she wants to know if you or they want to know if you draw superheroes and their favorite is Spider-Man. Oh no, this is the question is from Silas at Barnard Elementary School. So do you draw superheroes? Their favorite is Spider-Man. So if you do draw them, what's your favorite? Who's your favorite?
First off, hi Salis, and superheroes are awesome. Um, ooh, favorite. I would say probably Spider-Man or Wolverine. Yeah, I think Spider-Man right now, just because of No Way Home. Like that movie was amazing. So yeah, and I do draw superheroes, and Spider-Man was one of the first superheroes that I've drawn. So yeah,
Mhm.
you got good taste, Silas.
Spider-Man and Wolverine were like my two back in the day too, for sure.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I mean that seems like a good place to land. I just want to say again, thank you so much for letting me be a part of your big day, and I'm always happy to celebrate debut books and new awesome books, especially when they're with other Vietnamese American creators. So everyone, go get yourself a
Yeah.
copy of
Yeah.
this. You can. I didn't realize that by getting this book, you have the key to a third language or another language. I'm going to, in addition to studying Vietnamese, I'm going to learn gibberish so that I can be trilingual very soon. But
I'll send you the font.
It's a beautiful book, and I look forward to seeing it out in the world and seeing what you come up with next.
Thanks, man. Thanks for talking to me. Actually,
Yeah.
I love your stuff.
Thanks so much to the both of you, Young and Min. That was such a wonderful conversation to have. And these events are so special because you share these personal stories with us. And it really gives us insight into the book. And it was just so special to hear about your lives and just all the details of the books, like hearing about the circles versus the squares and how you interpreted the bus as a kid. It was just so special. So thank you for that. Also wanted to thank all the audience members. We had amazing questions. So good. Yeah. Round of applause, everyone. And there were a lot of families and kids here. So thank you all for joining us tonight. That was very special too. As you can see from the chat, there's still time to get the book. Tonight you can get Young's book and well as Minh's book. And we always appreciate you supporting our independent bookstore. So thank you for that. And then finally, just to thank you for reminding us the importance of connecting with others in these brave acts and reminding people to reach out, especially for little kids when it looks like they need a friend. Just that brave act of kindness is so important. So thank you for reminding us about that. And thank you both so much for being here. We really appreciate it. And hopefully we'll get to see you in person for the next book or books.
That would be amazing. Looking forward to it.
Thank you to Politics and Prose. They're always one of my favorite bookstores, even though I'm across the country now. So everyone support your independent bookstore, especially PNP.
Yep.
Thank you.